Just a heads up, folks, even though we're talking about a film this time that is meant for children, this discussion isn't. We are going to touch on some of the abuse behind the scenes. So we will be talking about child abuse and animal abuse. As always, if you're not up for that today, totally get it. There will be other episodes. A friend was visiting me in Scotland, and we were in Glasgow, and we just needed to go to hang out somewhere for a bit before her train. And we went into this weird, tiny, old manny pub. You know, the kind of the really old men that like
old man pub,
have completely forgotten women exist by the way that they look at us. And it really looked like something straight out of the 20s or 30s. Like it was like dingy and dark. And then we noticed that on along the top of just above the bar was a whole set of figures of the Wizard of Oz. And we're just like, are we at a Friend of Dorothy pub?
I guess maybe it was the elder queers performing the heteronormativity that they weren't allowed to be themselves, and they just could never shake off that mold while socializing even. So you never know.
You never know, but I'll always remember that. That was the Friend of Dorothy pub.
That's really cool. It's really funny.
So I love this. I love this movie. Who doesn't know this movie?
Yeah, no, and I mean, it's one of those things where it's one of those things where it's a film that like you think there's nothing really to like evoke about or speak about it, because it is so old and it's so iconic, and there's so much it has such a hold on pop culture that like it's referenced fucking everywhere. Because
including in Farscape, which is why we're doing it here. Hi, friends. Welcome to Not Exactly Muppet Sex and Trauma. I'm Sara Ezzat. I make the Fat Culture Critic videos on YouTube. And with me today is my friend Dani, who is not a film critic.
You call yourself a film critic. Hi, how are you doing? I'm I have my own channel, and I analyze film and TV, sometimes long form, sometimes shorter videos. So I've loved this film since I was a child. Sarah asked me if I wanted to do it. I'm like, yep, I'd absolutely love to talk about this.
Yeah, it's a special one. So yes, it's a joke that you're not a film critic. That you
not
So, I don't know that anyone needs a summary, but here is my summary for Wizard of Oz. My name is Dorothy Gale from Kansas. A big storm hit and I got shot through a tornado. Now I'm lost in some distant part of the Storyverse on a brick road, a yellow brick road, full of strangely familiar life forms. Listen, please, is there a wizard out there who can help me? I'm being hunted by a wicked old witch. I'm doing everything I can. I'm just looking for a way home. Okay, you don't know that, but that is the opening monologue from Farscape rewritten.
Oh, okay. I'm an interesting one. I was the only person to make it onto the podcast because I have like zero favorite reference for Farscape, and I have more favorite reference for the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, I'll talk a bit about the parallels, but mostly we're going to talk about the Wizard of Oz today, because I'm just, some of these episodes are just things that I can have some excuse for talking about because it's somewhat tangentially related to Farscape, and Farscape is a big Wizard of Oz is the biggest influence on it. It's a story about a astronaut who gets sucked through a wormhole and deposited in another part of the galaxy, where he makes friends with a guy who looks like a lion, a plant lady, and an ex-fascist learning to have compassion.
Okay.
While being chased, while being chased across the galaxy by a guy whose brother he accidentally kills.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing yeah,
the parallel.
parallels. I mean, it's not a shocking thing considering just how incredibly influential the Wizard of Oz has been to like pop culture, American pop culture, just pop culture in general. It's been
Mhm.
we have a mutual we have a mutual colleague, Carl Calgren, who does Bell High, and I remember Shakespeare quote. It has been referenced by everyone, everyone, like the Simpsons, Family Guy. He's a huge influence from David Lynch. Like he's massive, massive Wizard of Oz fan. It's really across a lot of his work. So yeah,
Yeah, it is one of the foundational myths of Western culture,
no, completely. Especially
Western film culture, and especially gay culture. There is
very
just
much so.
something there is something about, right from the moment that she starts singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, that just it just has this feeling of,
Yeah.
you know looking for a place is that doesn't exist, where everything is good and safe.
Mm.
And that is always, spoken straight to the heart of queer folks. And I think it connects to uh, a song that I've talked about twice in these adjacent ones, which is Rainbow Connection.
Mm. Yeah.
As we talking about Muppet movies. Um, yeah, and it's that longing for the whole film is about the longing for home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and it's an interesting one because like The Wizard of Oz is one of the one of especially the movies that have like kind of survived throughout culture and history within film film history, which is barely over 100 years old. But it's one with a very pointed message about the the there's no place like home, there's no place like home, the idyllic need for be home, which is an interesting contrast to the fact that it has such a queer following, because the film, as in its textual form, is about remembering your roots and making sure that no matter how much you want to travel and survive in other areas, um it's your home is where you belong. And I think that was influenced at the time, kind of more post Wall Street crashes, where people post Wall Street crash, the 20s and 30s, which would have had people striving for home for more financial reasons. And but yeah, like you said, the longing for home doesn't have to just be the very literal textual way it is in the movie. It can have a stronger symbolic meaning. And I think that's the thing about Over the Rainbow, and the fact that the movie is very it's got a very striking it was very famously the technicolor contrast of when she goes to this fantastical world where the world becomes full of color and life and beauty and wonder. um that it's it's interesting that it had such an adaptation from the queer community, who saw this message in way more of a subtextual way, especially when you compare the kind of more say see the whole homegrown sepia colored merry kind of
Kansas.
Kansas, more downgraded, more dull compared to the magical, mystical, wondrous world that like the movie itself doesn't do a great job of conveying its more intentional textual message, whereas the subtext is a lot more apparent because she makes friends and she goes on adventures, and she forms her own community, and found family is a huge theme within queer cinema.
Mm-hmm. Glinda gives her the textual message at the end,
Mm.
the moral that if you ever go looking for anything, there's no need to go beyond your backyard, because
Yeah,
it's what you're looking for is within you, or and is in your home. But the subtextual message is sort of home is where you find it.
yeah,
in many ways, because she always had the way to go home in her ruby slippers. And
Mm.
it's an interesting, like, sort of when you reflect on home, because one of my favorite plots is the idea of when you returning to a place, returning to the same place but different because of the experience you've had.
Yeah.
I like that, like, as very different than the hero's journey that's about going out and
Mm.
proving yourself and whatever, but the sort of what feels like Dorothy's journey of having and going through an experience, coming back to where you were, but changed. Except we never really live with her change. It's sort of like
Mm.
the change is left with us. We are changed for having gone through her journey with her.
Yeah.
Um, we have seen Oz, we have seen the Emerald City, we have, you know, we have seen color.
Mm.
Um, and I think film was never the same after we had seen color. And I think a lot of us are never the same after experiencing this story, because
Yeah.
which comes into our lives for so many of us as children, or often stories that are inspired by it can have the same effect, that, it changes the way that you think about home and friends. And it's interesting that the play that this was based on was actually banned in
Oh, I
some
didn't know
parts
that.
of the states
Oh, okay.
because because the idea that she was dreaming of another life was considered blasphemous.
Mm. I'm assuming that's why again, I wouldn't know the exact, like, there probably is notes written about it, but that's could be why there was such a tacked on message about, like, home being the place you want to, in contrast to the wonderful adventure she goes on with way more interesting characters and stuff you see in the actual film. In this more recent rewatch, the one thing that just stuck out to me is that I always imagine the Kansas scenes are in black and white. They're not, they're sepia toned.
Mhm.
And one of the things about the costume choice, I don't know if this was intentional or not, is that you can see some of the blue in Dorothy's dress. Because it's so, especially when you see in the black, when you see in the color set, the Technicolor segment, it's so bright and sticks out. There's a slight hint of the hue within the black and white shooting, and that always stuck out to me because she feels like it makes her feel like more of an outsider in comparison to the rest of the cast, who are in much more grounded, demure clothing. And I like the contrast because, again, it shows her as the perpetual outsider, the one who's dreaming of another life. And then this is just something I noticed in on this rewatch. And again, like I said, I've probably seen this film 100 times. And the best films, I think, is that you see something new in them every time you go back to rewatch them.
Mhm.
Um, so that just came to my mind while we were chatting. Um, And the one thing that did the one thing was when me and my friend were watching it, and like, if you ever watch a movie with friends, you chat a lot, you chat away with them, and you just kind of talk whatever. Both of us just stopped and just watched the Over the Rainbow sequence, and it's crazy that what a talented singer Judy Garland is. She just has a way of, like, she has such a resonant um such a resonant, yeah, groundedness to her performance, but she has such a way of kind of exhibiting a longing and that kind of wistfulness of dreaming of something bigger than where you are. And but she's such a talent. I don't know if you want to go into the darker elements of.
Yeah, I it's one of those ones I wish I knew the music theory behind it, but there is
Mm.
the contrast of this hopeful song, these hopeful words, with
Mm.
the maturity in her voice and the sort of
Yeah.
the melancholy that is created by this. Like, she sounds already like a 40-year-old woman who's lived a whole life and is like, I am tired of this world, and dreaming of a soft safety place. Um, and yet it's the guise of she looks so young, younger than she was. Um, and yeah, and it's just like it's so many contrasts.
Yeah.
Because she's dreaming of a place, but really it's commenting on the place, what's wrong with the place that she's in.
Yeah. No, completely. And I think a lot of it is to do with like the way that they kind of present her character kind of adds to her that kind of sense of wanting to belong and wanting to kind of escape. Because I just want to give a shout out because I was rewatched this video just to prepare for this. It's called The Disastrous Production History of the Wizard of Oz. It's from a channel called Yesterworld Entertainment. If you
Ah,
haven't seen it, it's a really, really good breakdown of like the production history and the disasters behind that. But one thing to point out is that one of
I'll put the link in the description.
this movie famously had like 4 or 5 different directors. And the guy before Victor Fleming, I'm blanking on the name, but um, he wanted to basically get across because in the book Dorothy is blonde and she's younger, and that was the whole thing. They tried to basically dollify Judy Garland by like putting on her makeup, making her makeup look way more to make her look way more kind of youthful, and they dyed her hair. They put kind of blonde highlights in her hair to evoke that feeling. And he asked her to basically um, play it more like a Disney princess. One of the important things about the production history of this is that the reason they decided Wizard of Oz would be a viable project was because of the success of Snow White. Beforehand, movies, dedicated to children weren't considered profitable because they weren't the ones spending the money. They're the ones spending all the money. Then Snow White exploded, and they were like, okay, we can actually make these popular children's properties into films. So they wanted her to be played like basically a Disney fairy tale princess. But once Victor Fleming came in, he told her to remove all the makeup to make the makeup more subtle and natural and have Garland just play the character as herself. And I think that adds to the whimsy of her being such a small town demure girl. And as you mentioned, her already having that sense of weightiness to her performance and her delivery, it really gets across that she's someone who has gone through a lot in her very young life, finding this kind of wonderland. And a lot of it is portrayed through the fact that Garland has such a distinctive sense of normalcy and a sense of weightedness to the way she longs for her aunt, she longs for her family, but also longs to escape. And I think that also plays into the queer themes because a lot of the tragedy of queer people is that they do try hard to be connected to their families. It's usually the families are the ones who kind of push them away. So having that longingness does add to that themes, but I do think it would probably save the film that they really toned down the kind of doll likeness and the kind of the theatrical youthfulness that they want to push with her, because I think that really adds to the contrast of the wacky, wonderful technical world and these crazy whimsy characters. That while she doesn't entirely not fit in with them, she has a bit more of a connection to the real that absorbs people into it. And I think gives them an ability to reflect on escaping into this kind of world. That makes sense.
Yeah, there's a mix of artifice and authenticity that makes it very drag, actually.
Yeah. No, no, I completely see that.
um yeah, the way that like the everything is very consciously fabricated,
Mm,
and but the feelings are completely authentic. Um it and yeah, it is a thing that you get. It is what makes it so campy. And it
mm,
is
yeah,
so theater and so drag. And the way in which she is kind of a doll, and also kind of a 40-year-old woman, and
yeah,
also kind of an actual child, all at the same time. But it's hard to imagine any other person ever in this role. There are other Dorothys. Return. I think I might do a Return to Oz discussion for one of these.
Oh man, I haven't seen that movie in so long. It's so good.
It's so good, and that one, like this one, opens so many ideas. That one traumatized the fuck out of me as a kid. It's so scary. Um, and again, you have a very unique actor in the role of Dorothy. Then, but there's no one quite like there was never anyone quite like Judy Garland. And yeah, she had a bloody awful childhood.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah, and yet she's kind of left us this eternal sort of this eternal performance of someone caught in between child and adult, in between girl and woman, in between the home you grow up in as a child and the home you find. And it's just kind of lightning in a bottle.
No. I mean, so much of the production of this was basically complete like happenstance. Like rather famously, the part of Dorothy nearly went to Shirley Temple, who would have been more age appropriate for the role. But it ultimately went down to the fact that Garland was a much more talented singer than, again, no offense, Shirley Temple, obviously, but her ability suited the singing parts a bit much better, and especially as again, this is another thing that video I mentioned made me realize. I didn't actually know that musicals being incorporated into the narrative, musical acts being incorporated into the narrative was actually a pretty new thing. When they did Wizard of Oz, it was like experimental because what movies used to do was they stopped the movie completely for a showstopper. Like, a showstopper, that's where that came from. They literally just stopped the movie dead to put on a musical performance. But for this, the music actually played into the the actual narrative. And like I said, the power of Over the Rainbow. Another thing that I didn't realize was the Victor Fleming actually left the production, but really late in, as in they filmed most of it, and he got replaced by King Vidor. If you if you don't know him, he's a pretty famous silent film director. He um one of my favorite films from when I was in my 20s was one called The Crowd. And it's actually an interesting contrast because it's about a man he was literally born on the 4th of July and has a lot of aspirations to make it, that he was destined for great things, but the drudgery and the effects of our capitalist world, again, this movie was made in 28, so just before the Wall Street crash, that basically his aspirations get crushed by the world around him. I think that's really interesting because he shot the Kansas scenes exclusively. Vidor did. Like as in he shot it's the beginning of the film and the end of the film were shot by him. And he was the reason why in uh Somewhere Over the Rainbow, Garland is actually walking around. She's moving. She wasn't like usually she would have you either do a dance number or you just kind of stand and do your performance, but Garland was allowed to move around the set. And it really adds again to that authenticity and that theatricality that um blends really well into her performance. Like you said, there's that camp element of how she played it where it feels like it's got a kind of sense of performativity that comes from sense of realness. And I do think that like having someone like Vidor shoot it in a way that allows her to just glide around and move very naturally, it adds to that sense of longing. Like she just wishes to walk to that place that makes her feel more whole. It makes her feel fulfilled. I know I feel like I'm kind of harping on about Over the Rainbow, but it's probably the most iconic scene in the film. So
Yeah, it's we're talking about the Wizard of Oz. We can talk about Over the Rainbow.
Yeah.
But yeah, just thinking about the sort of the contribution to musical theater, to the way that this became the model, and then to again that was then brought back into film again because this so much influenced Howard Ashman.
Yeah.
Who sort of solidified the "I Want" song being such an important thing in the Disney mode of making musicals, which is a lot of how, you know, the generations, millennials and after, experience musicals is through the Disney version. And I was just thinking about "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." I was thinking about the songs that I connect it to. It's not just an "I Want" song.
Oh.
It's because it's an "I want somewhere" thing. So I was thinking about it in connection with other, important musical songs of this nature, like "Somewhere, a Place for Us" from um West Side Story, uh, which Sondheim wrote the words to, of course. And but also to "Part of Your World,"
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ashman and the Little Mermaid, and another Howard Ashman one, "Somewhere That's Green." I think the most direct parallel, to "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" is "Somewhere That's
It's great.
Green."
Yeah, it's an interesting one where I don't know if this was even a conscious thing that Ashton would have noticed that like a lot his songs can be so linked to Over the Rainbow, but often a very different contrast to how he writes them. And it's actually interesting because another thing they have in common, Over the Rainbow has in common with Part of Your World, is that both of them are really cut. Um, the for Over the Rainbow, for Part of Your World, it's different. Um, Genius himself, Jeffrey Katzenberg, said the song was too boring and kids would be bored by it, and he nearly got it removed. For Over the Rainbow, it was actually cut after after the reel was finished, as in they had actually completed the movie, they had test screened it, and they nearly cut it. Like they nearly caught it because I think they argued it's too maudlin or it was inappropriate for her to be singing this on a farm or some bullshit. Again, that video goes into more of it. Basically, the two producers had to threaten to leave before the main head of MGM was just like, give him this second song. It's the most iconic song in the film. I say we're part of your world for
there
basically executives.
there is this whole tradition of studio heads not trusting the audience, and especially not trusting kids, because they
Yeah.
cut one of the best songs from Muppets Christmas Carol on the same "Kids will be bored by this."
Mm. I'd say say it was also that was also Katzenberg. I mean, one of my most famous threads, one of the most famous Twitter threads, was me comparing him cutting, cutting Part of Your World to cutting, because there was an audience who grew up with only the not the theatrical version of Muppets Christmas Carol, which had the song removed, and they don't think the song is necessary. I disagree. So I got into a big hissy argument about it because like that still bothers me that they cut the song, but most people agree like that movie needs that song. And can you imagine Wizard of Oz without Over the Rainbow if the producers had gone their way? I don't
No,
think it would have been as like the rest of the film is great, don't get me wrong. I just do not think it would have hit as emotionally as it does. Um
yeah, it's one of the most important. This film does a great job of planting and payoff, and
hmm,
"Over the Rainbow" is the most important one because it plants that she is seeking something,
yeah.
and and then she finds it in the colored world, and you know it is sort of over the rainbow to be in this
Hmm,
completely fantastic world. But then when she gets there, she misses what she had, and
yeah.
it's kind of like she goes from missing the thing she didn't know what it was to missing what she had taken for granted.
Hmm,
And that's just such a universal thing, I mean, especially I'm someone who did move someplace completely different in my 20s.
hmm,
From I moved from Saskatchewan, which is a lot like Kansas, to Aberdeen, Scotland, which is nothing like Oz. But,
If you want to look at it from a certain point of view. I've never been to
yeah.
Aberdeen. I don't have many conception of it.
Well, I think it's probably, given you're in Ireland, it's probably a lot more familiar to you than Saskatchewan.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the thing that, a lot of us do in our 20s, in that early adulthood place of moving somewhere completely different. And there's a lot of great things about that because
Yeah.
it's the most incredible challenge to build a life entirely from scratch and find new friends and
Yeah.
all of that. But also, you miss what you left behind. It's a great
No.
line from an Ani DeFranco song that there's nothing like seeing your own history in the faces of your friends. And of course, you can never actually go back. The Wizard of Oz lies to us in that you can't really go back. You can go back, but you will be different and the place will be different. So
Mm.
you never truly go back. But yeah, there is the thing that um about life and about stories that, you know, you're always kind of missing something and you're always
Mm.
kind of looking for something. And that's just part of the human condition.
Mm. And it's again, it goes back to that queer reading because again, that's a huge aspect of from what I heard. Like, I've had friends say this that like a lot of people when they come out, they move to another area completely so they can just kind of reform their own identity. I think it's especially the case, like again, these small again because I'm from Cork and like Cork is a very small, very interconnected area. So if you want to come out as somebody different, it's probably better to move another place. And I think that adds to that reading as well. And it could be why this movie is another reason, one of the ways that movie is so resonant, because there is that sense of sadness that you can't belong in the place that you grew up in and with the people you love and grew up with. So I think that's another way that again unintentionally so, but it relates to that whole experience. And again, intentionality is very, very minimal thing to do with like film analysis, but it's yeah, it definitely adds to that sense of a kind of bittersweet undercurrent
Mhm.
towards Oz and towards leaving, where you see, especially when you see Dorothy get really, really upset over leaving her friends behind. Um,
I'll miss
it's an
you
interesting, and
most of all.
no, no, I still think of that Family Guy joke where the other two get really offended by that. Um, and yeah, and it's definitely one of the funny things because again, Water famously, L. Frank Baum wrote like 14 Oz books, and like I've never actually read The Wonderful Wizard of Oz or any of his work, um, but it it kind of shows a testament to this film that even Return to Oz, I think, takes elements from the sequels, but it's not entirely kind of a faithful reimagination because this movie overtook absolutely everything about them. And they were very popular when they came out. I think again, I actually counted this. Before the 29 movie, there was 19 different adaptations of the Oz series. A lot of them actually written by Bob for film. And it reminds me of Titanic, where there are like 20 different Titanic movies all throughout the history of the like I think the first ones came out like a month after the ship sank and had one of the survivors act in it. But then Cameron's movie came out in 97 and not that we didn't get Titanic movies, but it's just like society decided this is the Titanic movie and never really kind of made another one in the same kind of scale. It's the same with Oz, that like every film, every adaptation of Oz, which there have been several of them since, they are either influenced by or forced to be compared to the 39 movie. And I think that the fact that it left such an indelible kind of mark on pop culture that, exacerbates even the book it's based on, which was extremely popular at the time. It's an interesting way that you know how art evolves and takes form and shape in all these different ways because like we could be seeing like because one of the examples that comes to mind is A Christmas Carol, which there's some great live readings out there if you want to check them out. Um, that if there was it was similar, like if there wasn't the definitive Wizard of Oz movie, we'd probably have like 20, 40, 50 different adaptations throughout the line. Like Christmas Carol, there is no one definitive of Christmas Carol. There's several. There's a lot of adaptations of that, even going back to I think even the 1800s, like the late 1800s when film first started coming out. That's how far back that the adaptations of that book date. Whereas with Oz, there's a 29 movie, and then everything else compares to that film. I just think it's an interesting way of how certain markers happen that kind of reshape this kind of, as you said, this form of American myth.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, some things just become iconic.
yeah, completely.
I've read a play version because my sister was in it in high school,
Oh,
and
cool.
and I read some of it with her. She played Auntie M because
Oh,
she was
lovely.
chubby, and
Oh,
the
um,
only in high school, but as the fat kids always end up playing the aunt. Um,
of course.
yeah, and then she played the aunt Emma in Oklahoma the next year. It was a whole arc.
Mm.
But also, yeah, on I was like one of the kids traumatized by Return to Oz. And I remember watching also there was a cartoon series of the set in Oz that I in the 80s that I used to watch that was very I remember being very sort of sepia colors, very sort of yellows and earth. And then I remember the TikTok man. I don't, it's those things that you don't like half formed little pieces of memory.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, no, completely.
yeah, but, and it's all very, very, very weird. Um, because it was the 80s and, you know, and often kids media is very weird. Um,
Yeah, no, great.
yeah, but this is the iconic, the one. It is the magic bullet. Uh
Yeah.
and in a way that nothing else Oz related. And I don't know that any other film in film history has the holds the position that Wizard of Oz does.
None that come to mind. Like it's very, 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 very distinctive in the place it holds in this kind of pop culture. As you said, there's so many kids who have that same experience of growing up with the Wizard of Oz. Like this one film from the 30s. Like there are probably tons of really popular films from that year that you don't even know even exist.
I think the
Um,
closest one would be The Sound of Music.
yeah, I can see that argument.
To
Um,
have that kind of place in pop culture. Um, and yet yeah, I don't know. That's a very different. That's just a lot of young male attracted people discovering that they're male attracted when they meet Christopher Plummer's character.
yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I was going to say that's a horse of a different color.
That is a horse with a different color. That is a good joke. And I think the Climb Every Mountain has kind of goes into one of these iconic songs about looking for a place, looking for a thing.
Mm.
In line with somewhere over the rainbow and somewhere that's green. The way that songs about longing kind of lodge in so many of our brains.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of longing for something different obviously is just because not obviously just a queer experience, it's a very universal experience. But if I compare it to being neurodivergent as well,
Hmm.
that was, I've been indie longer than I've been queer. So, it's definitely something that kind of, that stands out to me. in an ableist world. Sorry, just another fun fact, because again, when I was watching this with my friend, so like we obviously had in our head that like there was a lot of unfortunately mistreatment of animals in the old days of Hollywood. If you know the stories, you know the stories. And I was kind of worried.
Animals, children,
Like,
actors.
anyone really, yeah. Don't make a movie, basically, if you're evoking the 20s. But me and my friend were just like, did they dye the horses? I hope not. Then I looked into it. And apparently the ASPCA was like, you can't dye them, don't do it. So they covered them in gelatin. They had three different horses and they colored a different colored horse in gelatin. And they had to shoot the movie as fast as possible because the horses were eating the gelatin.
Oh God.
So they had to rush through those scenes. Magic of movies.
Yeah, horses on gelatin and children on barbiturates. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah. Again, if you do watch the video, it goes into the diet they put Judy Garland on, and it's rather bleak.
barbiturates and cigarettes. Yeah.
But
Uh,
yeah, um, yeah, coffee, cigarettes, amphetamines. What did they have her eat? Yeah, it sounded horrible.
very,
It's
very
like
little.
she was 16 years old. God damn. Because I put up a status thing like I do love this film. And again, because uh this is a rather odd comparison to make, but it's more in the general framework of like the evils of making entertainment. That we're both Joss Whedon fans, and that's something I've also had to grapple the fact that my favorite show
No,
was made by
no,
somebody
no,
who was.
no. I am a Buffy fan. I am not a fan of Joss Whedon as a
Yeah,
person.
I let me rephrase that. Let me rephrase that. I used to be a Joss Whedon fan.
Indeed, yes. And then we
I
learned he
used to
was a
be,
complete
and
shitheel.
then we heard he's a shithead. But like you kind of have to deal with that kind of that kind of gravity on your entertainment. That a lot of it was made under very nefarious circumstances where people legitimately got hurt. And
True.
if I could take, and as much as this movie means to me, and as much as I adore it and the effect it's had, and how much it stayed with me all my life, if I could take that away, Judy Garland to have a better life, I'd do it in a heartbeat. Because it's at the end of the day, it does entertainment. It wasn't worth her life, but that's not what happened. At the end of the
Yeah.
day,
Yeah, I think this is why, for me, there is a line of separation between things that happened making art before we knew that the thing happened
yeah.
and like continuing after we knew the thing happened. Like the suffering that Judy Garland went through probably is part of what made her performance so incredible and get
Mm.
like and left the emotions that are there. But no way in hell would ever a child would ever agree to a child being put through the shit she did
Yeah.
in order to get a performance equally out of it. Like in the
No.
same way, my rule with Joss Whedon is I adore Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. I have complicated feelings about, but there are episodes that I adore, and a lot of it I think feel with Joss Whedon is his collaborators really made the big difference. But
No. Really.
I won't watch anything after I learned anything made after it came to light that he was a shitheel.
No.
So
Really.
I haven't watched the Nevers, even though Claudia Black is in it, and I adore Claudia Black. And but I just like I said that I wouldn't support anything, and I adore Neil Gaiman's work,
Mm.
and I'm not going to
Yeah.
watch anything made after now. Um, well, I I'm torn about Good Omens, the final season of Good Omens, because it is already in production. But sort of like I'm gonna have be really uncomfortable watching anything of his going forward because it would appear that he is a shitheel who doesn't understand power. And we really need to stop. We really need like any man who gets power and women who gets power, J.K. Rowling, uh, needs to have like a whole ethics of power, like
seminar or
course
something.
given to them before they're ever allowed to be around other people. Because yeah, um, having the power to having power over people is does very weird things to people, and yeah, um, but yeah, it's kind of like I adore I adore Vincent van Gogh's work, but it wasn't worth the pain. But also, it's I remember Hannah Gadsby talking about how the colors in the sunflowers may have come out of treatments he was taking for his depression.
Yes.
So it
Yeah.
wasn't as if we think of it as suffering makes great art, but maybe it is survival and what you do to keep living in a world that is hostile and weird and difficult. The way that you adapt is what leads to the great art. And there will always be things that people adapt to. Uh, it doesn't need to be suffering.
No, completely. And again, just to roll it back to Judy Garland. Not that obviously because we're bringing up a lot of contemporaneous examples that the issues of abuse in Hollywood and abuse with famous people have gone away, but the studios had a lot more absolutely insane control over their actors and over their talent. Um, and yeah, like you said, as you said, a lot of it reflects a lot of that pain can reflect into great art, but great art isn't worth that pain, and we definitely need to move past that idea. Um, and like I like that reframing of suffering. It's not so much framed around the suffering; it's through the survival and how they reflect on how they survived into their abilities. Because um like she was involved, like again, Garland was involved in this stuff when she was around 12 years old, and she was a part of a musical troupe. She had a mother who didn't really consider her welfare as a priority compared to how much money she could make. And I don't think you can separate what she went through with the art that she created, with the art that she perpetuated. And I'm not trying to argue that like her suffering made her famous, because that's a bullshit and very toxic attitude. But I think it's better to say that um she was able to utilize her life and what she went through to become such an iconic figure. Because it's not just this movie. This is her most famous role. He went on to win she got an Oscar for A Star Is Born, and it's the only watchable version of that story that is out there. To be honest, I don't like any of those other movies. That she that we need to reframe this
Almost
idea
fetishizing of abuse.
that abuse makes talent. Abuse doesn't make talent. Abuse just makes more abuse. That's its only.
Yeah, and I think the sad reality is, if we think about the time, the 30s, there were a lot of children being abused. There was a lot
Yeah.
of child labor. And a lot of it was just led to nothing but suffering. I think it is some people, I think it's the survival and the adaptation that makes the art. And I think that it's that makes us look up to them, is that people who have suffered and been abused and been rejected as children, especially gay people, saw themselves in Judy, but it's not in her suffering. I think it's in her surviving, and in her surviving and keeping hope, because that's what Somewhere Over the Rainbow is. It's the hope, and that's why I connect it too to the rainbow connection, which
Yeah.
is, you know, and there's an evolving thing there because
Yeah, it's
somewhere
always an
over the
expansion
is
of.
looking for a place, and Rainbow Connection is looking for people.
Mm.
um, and
And it's hard to finish off the trilogy.
yeah, well, somewhere I don't know that somewhere that's green is exactly the
Yeah.
would exactly be the
Absolute.
third one. Well, I'm but maybe somewhere, there's somewhere a place for us is kind of the
Mm.
bridge in between the Rainbow Connection and the Somewhere Over the Rainbow. But yeah, or maybe the other song to think about in this framework is "I Will Survive."
Yeah. No,
to,
I wouldn't even
to
thought of
just
that. Yeah.
to just go
It's
full gay.
it works for the thematic through line that we're putting into this.
Yeah, and if we could bring in some Chapel Roan to bring it right up to the present. But no, like there's this. Yes, I am being treated like shit, which in Dorothy's case is the mildest thing of I'm being ignored. In Dorothy's
Mm.
in Judy's case, it's I'm being abused.
Yeah.
And in a lot of for a lot of gay people, it's I'm being misunderstood at the very least. There are a lot of other shit too. Um, and it is this promise of survival and of finding, and I think that's why the theme of the ruby slippers and the you had the answer all along, you just needed to find it, even if the you don't need to look beyond your own front door is dumb. But it's also not, because like I think reminding people that you do have it within you to survive. It may not be in your front yard, but it can be in your heart. Like it's the cowardly lion having his courage all along.
Mm.
The and just needing it to be seen. The
Yeah.
the three guys with the things they want. What they want is what the wizard gives them is recognition of the things that they had. And that's really
Yeah.
what we want, what we look to others for, is to be seen. Um, but it is a bit like it is. I'm gonna draw the line between Somewhere Over the Rainbow and I Will Survive. Is you have it within you, and also if you seek community to survive whatever you have to, whatever shit you're going through.
Mm.
And like the thing about doing that, moving and look the sort of geographical cure, as a person I've done a few times, moving to be like, I'm gonna find a new place. I'm gonna
Yeah.
find the place. Is wherever you are, there you are. um, so the stuff follows, and like it's really how you find a home within yourself
Yeah.
to build a home wherever you are.
Yeah, like I said, it's an interesting dichotomy. And it's thinking about like returning home, and just to make it, this is more of an explicit queer connection. But I was reminded of a film I saw a couple of years ago. It's called 1985, and it's about a young man who returns home for Christmas, and he's just gotten an AIDS diagnosis, and obviously the title 1985 at that time, that was a death sentence essentially. And it's an interesting kind of contrast to what we're describing, because it's clearly about him wanting to connect, because he's obviously closeted, but it's clearly about him wanting to reconnect with his family, but they're surrounded by this toxic culture bearing down onto them through, like, you see Reagan on TV a lot in it. It's a wonderful film. It's beautiful. It made me cry so hard. It's probably hardest I've cried in a film in a long time. And I know this is a really depressing fucking dive to, but my point is more that the home connection is something that I was just kind of mulling around, because that is, I think that is in, well, a lot of cases, a lot of queer people just, their family are too corrosive for them to even like want a longing for and they disconnect from it completely, and it's completely valid. But
Absolutely.
for a lot of queer people, I think wanting that understanding of that part of their lives that they're able to with their family, but they can't, not so much because of their own family's bigotry, not just that, but because of the world surrounding them is being basically, you know, trained to despise them.
Hmm.
Um, it's a really sad reality that we live with. And again, this movie is more of a fantasy than being real. But I think that part of that great escapism is that you're able to kind of cultivate that longing through a very safe space, not just the wonderful fantasy world to escape in, but having that very genuine connection that your family didn't realize how much they meant to you until you were gone, and having that come to fruition, I think can be important too. And I think um, that's an interesting way because again, I like I said, I've always felt just even having this conversation, I've always felt the ending of it felt very tacked on compared to the rest of the film, but it actually adds to the tapestry that is the legacy of this film and the various different ways it can be interpreted and absorbed. And I think that's why it is so timeless and it is so beloved by so many people throughout the years.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the thing is by in saying like that, the answer is the recognition within yourself. I'm not saying
Mm.
like that that means you shouldn't leave home. Uh,
No.
but because often that is, that I am very glad that I did, and it is often the right thing to do, whether or
Mm.
not home is, even if it's just, that the familiar is too familiar and you need to have an adventure to go and find
No,
yourself.
absolutely.
Um, and the thing about, but that you will always take yourself with you is you'll never find Oz. Maybe moments of it on a dance floor, Pink Pony Club and all, but uh really the thing you do is build Oz. You build the home for yourself, you build the community, you build the rainbow connection. And then it's there when other people are looking for it too, but then they come in and they help build it. Cause I'm thinking about how like the the queer community didn't seek rights. They stood up and demanded them.
Yeah, exactly.
The generation before us did. They did the work. Um,
Yeah.
and there's no way to know what was it about that moment at Stonewall that made it the turning point that people just stood their ground, but they did. Um,
Mm.
and there were other moments. There's like the Compton's cafeteria, and I think that's what it's called. And there's other moments where people had fought back or stood back in different ways. And there's just a moment
Mm.
that um just is a tipping point. I think we're at one of those talking about queer stuff right now. I think we're at a bit of a
Yeah.
tipping point in that all the crap that the turfs have done for the last several years, but it's the particular distillation of going after
Man Khalif, I believe.
Iman Khalif,
So perfect.
the Algerian boxer, uh, who it's not the first cis woman they've gone after, but it's just so obvious and so it's just in front of the whole world stage that it feels a bit like a tipping point, especially if she sues them. Yes, please sue the woman out of her whole moldy castle.
I was going to say as well, she, like the fact that she, I mean, I don't want to make this completely go off topic because unfortunately I could talk about her bullshit for a long time, but especially with her doubling down on it is an extremely bold or stupid move considering how fucking strong libel law in the UK is, which she should know she has abused it herself.
Yeah, no, it is just it's ironic, and it's who knows why this seems to be a tipping point after everything else that's
Mm,
happened, but it doesn't make anything else, any of the other acts of resistance, any less important.
of course.
Um, but there just is a moment where sometimes with things where things start to change, things start to come together, and who knows why. I don't know why that was I don't know why I went there, but thinking about the whole like the potent Oz is within you to build the whole time because the sense of the ability to survive,
Yeah.
even though not everyone does, and that doesn't
Yeah.
make the people who don't any less worthy of having survived.
Completely.
Sometimes, sometimes you just sometimes it just doesn't. Sometimes things just don't come together
Yeah.
because it's not all about doing it for yourself because there's a very individualistic way of reading it to say that you had the power all along with the ruby slippers, but
Yeah.
it's not it's not just the individual thing. You had that, but you also have to have it in community. You have to have the friends to seek you, um, and to help you find that, and that somewhere there is the thing that makes survival happen.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. And it's actually funny because we mentioned Return to Oz, where it's obviously not an official sequel to the MGM Wizard of Oz, but it honestly picks up on a lot of this undercurrent thematics of the first film and expands upon it in a really interesting way that again, if you do end up talking about it, I'll happily rewatch it just to get my perspective. Because like that one she's again picking up friends, but it's not so much so she can go home and so that she can rebuild Oz and to save it. So it's an interesting contrast to this movie, especially coming from that team, the teams we are talking about of individual strength and individual longing. You don't mind us because I have I had another point I want to make it because I'm just staring at your background being the painting of the Emerald City. Um, that's such a striking moment when you first see it in the movie, and it's made me realize that matte paintings are a lost art. They're so profoundly gorgeous to look at whenever they pop up. And we were talking, me and my friend were talking about it, and he's one of my closest friends. He's a really big film head like I am. And our probably cynical reading of it is that, there was a big boom in the 70s where things became more gritty and realistic, and we just kind of trebled down on trying to make movies feel real, to make movies feel kind of as grounded as possible, as gritty as possible. That we lost kind of a sense of emotional honesty. And the thing about it is that all art is not so much you trying to capture a reality, it's you trying to capture an emotional truth. And I think we lose that by trying to double down on it being so realistic. And the one thing I love about this film is that, again, especially because we watched it on Amazon Prime, and it's more of a HD, 4K kind of thing, and you see how fake the flowers look now, and you see that it's obviously matte paintings, but I don't think it really matters if you can notice that because it's capturing you in the world. Also, I'm a Doctor Who fan. And I love the classic series. If I don't get over shitty effects, I could not watch anything. So,
I came up in the theater.
yeah, exactly. I think there is an emotional realness of this film that gets lost in filmmakers' um unwillingness or kind of a fear of being seen as silly or too artificial for a more cynical audience. And I think that's the one thing that this movie captures something true. It's really theatrical, yeah, because a lot of it was actually based on, I think, the play, the aesthetic. A lot of the aesthetics were based on the play that was written by it. So that theatricality comes across, and obviously, studio film. There was, studio sound sets where a lot of it was filmed. I think capturing a world in this kind of wondrous way without really worrying about it feeling real, feeling authentic, feeling grounded in terms of its more so much in terms of its tapestry, in terms of its um,
Mise en
kind
scène.
of mise en scène. Thank you, Jesus
Yeah.
words. Um,
That means everything you see on screen.
it's just interesting looking back at this film like 80 years later. It tells an emotional truth rather than trying so hard to go for a real truth, and I think that's a sense of a sense of artistry that a lot of people kind of lost in translation as movies matured and grew up, so to speak.
See, I will push back a little. I think that there is a place for realism and also for grittiness. As there is for artifice and for camp.
Hmm.
I think sincerity is what matters because you can go too far in the gritty, and I think
Yeah.
that we have and trying to put realism where realism doesn't belong, like say a musical Tom Hooper. Um, that's a place for the emotional truth not
Hmm.
to be more important than the realism of the filmmaking. Um, but there's also a tendency some to go too far into the camp that gets into the kitchen, gets into sort of sickly sweet, like for example, say Bridgerton, which is sort of I think the stuff that's kind of like that at the moment in that vein that seems to be kind of an answer to the overly critical grimdark, um, but isn't actually it's in opposition to it, but it's cut from the same cloth because it is equally inauthentic, equally insincere.
Right.
Whereas you can go dark and sincere, and it's great. You can you can do realism and be sincere, and it's great. Like um, The Crow would be my example for dark and sincere.
Mm.
Realism and sincere. There are a lot of great 70s movies that went into sort of
No, no, really.
the realism and and with the sincerity. And or this movie is bright and shiny but also incredibly sincere.
Mm.
And there there's so I think is Sound of Music, but like there's some musicals, especially from the 60s, that uh, went too far into the bright and shiny and away from the sincere. And it just is kind of an empty experience too. So sometimes entertainingly camp, but without, but in or that sort of where's the line between kitchen camp and the sort of loss of the emotional sincerity, and
No.
that's why musicals sort of fell out of favor for a while.
Yeah.
And and then they come back and people remember that they can be incredibly incredible and remarkable, um but they can all and then they can also be sickly sweet and just a bit
Mm.
twee. Twee is the
No.
word, yes.
Yeah. No, and yeah, I think I was being a bit too like hyperbolic with my statement of it. It's not so much that you can't. I mean, a lot, like you said, a lot of great films from the '70s and the have a lot of great downplayed realness to them. Like I love Scorsese stuff from then. Rocky's an obviously great example of that. And again, that's a movie that's incredible. Like even the one I brought up, King Beat or The Crowd, is one that is very grounded in its own way. Even that film, yeah, the film's from 1928 and has a great sense of authenticity to it. And I think that's more of what I meant is that people lose the emotional honesty in what they're telling while overcompensating on terms of in terms of what they want to get across. Like you said, Tom Hooper is a good example of that. You should not make Cats in the way he did. But there's a
Yeah.
question of whether you should make Cats as a movie at all. but that's not really the point of this.
But I definitely want a pro shot of the Jellicles ball one that they're doing in New York, because that is
no,
absolutely a fabulous idea to do something to turn it into a drag ball. Yeah, like I think it's when you get obsessed with style rather than
yeah,
trying to find what is right for the story,
yes.
because you couldn't do a gritty, realistic Wizard of Oz.
No, I'm. I don't know if they have tried. They probably like Return to Ours is dark, but it's
Re-
not gritty.
yeah, Return to Oz is more like dark fantasy. It's more in line
Yeah,
with like the labyrinth and that kind of thing.
yeah, the
Which
very
is
stuff from the 80s. That was really popular in the 80s as well.
yeah,
Um,
although also flip flopped at the box office, because I really
hmm.
think box office is not a way to judge success of a film.
No,
Uh,
again, this movie very famously did not do well.
mhm.
It found life later on, and it found life later on again through home entertainment, TV and
Yeah,
video.
just like It's a Wonderful Life, which is also
I brought that.
it's painfully sincere.
Yes, the example I brought up twice in my videos now because I am obsessed with that whole anecdote. It's a great like I think it's a great example again. For people who would think this movie is like I don't know kitschy or corny or dated, I think it's a good thing to look past that to see what a really beautiful, fun, emotional experience this film can be. And the funny thing is, we've mostly been talking about it in the abstract. We haven't even talked, like I already brought up production to bring up an example. We haven't brought up how fun the cast are and how great, all three of them were, the cast for her friends, they cast vaudeville actors and who the guy who played the Scarecrow was famous for being gangly legged. So they hired him and the guy who played the Cowardly Lion, who's my favorite of the three, was somebody who was known for doing really big, broad facial expressions. And that really comes across in his performance, especially with the fact that, again, it's something you look back at it and you like, it's difficult to get that kind of emotional expressionness in so much, prosthetic. Like, a lot
And
of actors.
it's a remarkable skill, but there are people who do it. We on this show we praise all the time. We talk about the character Dargo, who is
Mm,
in even more prosthetics and very you can the inspiration is definitely coming from the Cowardly
no,
Lion, and he's got tentacles.
no.
He's good, but oh my god, he breaks my heart.
Yeah, I
um,
mean, I know the Cowardly Lion, but he wouldn't have ever broken my heart. He's just really fucking funny. Like another thing that stood out to me while watching this again, this movie is genuinely really funny. And it's not something you think about the comedy of something from this age, because comedy ages really quickly. But I still laugh at him like breaking down when the dog attacks him and becoming a pathetic mess. It's a great contrast, it's a great gag, it's a great joke. Um,
yeah, physical comedy is one of the ones that ages best, and it's a lot of what
mm,
the comedy that they play with is, the vaudeville clowning stuff, and which
no.
is stuff that has aged beautifully in many ways. Like some of the
Mm.
tricks that they use are still the tricks that they used in the early days of clowning. Um,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, pratfalls
uh,
and you know big expressions and all of that.
and I'm thinking as well, the actress who played the Wicked Witch, Margaret Hamilton,
I
I think
love
she went
her.
on. She's great. Obviously you've seen. She went on to Mr. Rogers show,
Yes, she did.
and yeah, and she talked about her seeing her character, seeing the Wicked Witch as more of a vulnerable character than what you people would think that she had. I don't know the exact quote off by heart, but she felt a lot of kinship in the way her character played out, and I think it's a really interesting quote when you consider Wicked, um, and
Hmm.
how they managed to get that kind of emotional. But however you feel about the book and the theatrical play and the upcoming two movies for some reason. She managed to reach that emotion, that kind of emotional internalization that obviously isn't there on the screen because she's just a big, broad villain. And I just really like she seems very sweet. Apparently, she was I heard of her. She's like she was a school teacher. Towards the end of
apparently,
acting.
and kids were afraid of her. She loved
Oh
kids,
God.
but they were afraid of her after the Wicked Witch. That's why she went on with the Mr. Rogers.
Oh, that's really sweet.
But yeah, I love that they found someone who found empathy in
Hmm.
this character who is written as an out and out, cardboard
Evil
cutout of a
witch.
villain.
Yeah. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. She found empathy. I was trying to struggle to phrase that. Thanks.
Yeah, and she is iconic. She is
Mm.
as iconic as Dorothy, and in many ways, Glinda is not.
No, she's.
The
I don't find-
the the,
Um.
the dress is, but
Mm,
and it is a great performance, but it's so um it's good, but it's one note. It is.
yeah, and I mean, even in the even in the rather specific confines of this being a children's story with an arch vaught evil villain, part of her motivation is that Dorothy killed her fucking sister. That's a bit more relatable. I'm not saying she's right. I'm just saying I get it.
And one thing I love is how well drawn the wizard is.
Yes, I love that. I love that whole. Again, it's another. It is a movie, as you're saying. It is a movie of contrast, and I love this guy who's this big, broad. He has a scary head, and he's control over this village, and you find out he's just a second con artist. He's
Hmm.
not a bad guy, and that's the one thing I really appreciated because, again, I think this was post. I don't know. If this is a Hays Code film as well. I don't know if they had anything about people who did kind of con artistry, but you have this dude who he basically dupes people for a living to make money, and it's a very sympathetic depiction of it. He's not a like he says he says himself, but he's not a bad person. He's just trying to like make a living. One of my favorite little moments, one of my favorite more subtle moments is when it comes across him as when he's Mr. Marvel in the real world. And the sort of way he's trying to coerce her to go back home because she's just a young girl running away, that he brings up the anti-M stuff. Now, he's clearly talking out of his ass, but he's doing it in a way to convince this girl to go back home to where she's safe.
Hmm.
It's a nice little moment where you feel like he's not a bad person.
Yeah, and it shows us that he's doing it, and like there's even like he's happy to share his hot dog with the dog. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, they're setting us up for he's not a bad guy.
Mm.
I think there are aspects that are problematic other than obviously the way every vulnerable being was treated in this in the creation, from Judy
Yeah, yeah.
Garland to the horses to the little people, the little people who were the
Mm.
munchkins, and also I think a lot of children involved who probably weren't treated particularly well. But
No.
sort of in terms of problematic in the text, I think
Mm.
we had to have to acknowledge the only evil witches are ugly.
No, the funniest, no, that is like I cannot watch that without laughing anymore because literally the first thing she asks her is if you were a good witch or a bad witch. Linda is the most passive aggressive motherfucker who ever lived. She just found a teenage girl and asked her if she was ugly.
That's the thing about the book Wicked that I really appreciated is what they do with Glinda.
Yeah, yeah.
And they followed it through with the musical as well. Is this is a passive aggressive person?
Yeah. It's I love again. Well, you obviously brought up the point of the ruby slippers that she needed to know the power and stuff like that. But I always love people pointing out that Glinda and there's that really I think it's a Mad TV sketch of her like freaking the fuck out once she's told us that like she had the power all the time and Glinda just didn't bother telling her.
And of course, the text says, well, you needed to find out for yourself," and it's very obnoxious.
Yeah.
it's, it's,
You're,
it's, it's so didactic on the
yeah.
I'm going to tell you the moral, and the and but no, but you had to learn the moral for yourself. Um, I love her
Oh
big
man.
big dress, but man, that character of all the characters in that in the film, she is the least well drawn.
No, I
Um,
completely.
but yeah, like there is telling kids that ugly people are evil is really
Yeah,
not.
it's not a great. It's definitely something that's aged incredibly terrible. I mean, it wasn't good when it came out in 1939, but yeah, it's a rather awkward dividing virtue through appearances. Something that has a ripple effect even nowadays, but it's
Yeah,
not.
it's not as if the Wizard of Oz was the originator of desirability
No,
politics and the sort of the lookism. Um, but yeah, it sure did put include that lesson
correct. In a kids film too.
in a
It
kids film,
I don't.
and a lot of media, a lot of kids media does include things like
Yeah,
this. I love Terry Pratchett calls it out in the Tiffany Aching series that Tiffany thinks that she must become a witch because she has brown hair, and so her option is to become like a townsperson or a witch, because the heroines and the good girls all have blonde hair.
that's it's horrible. um,
Thankfully, kids media is getting away from that. At least that's very strict interpretation of like
yeah.
the blonde blue-eyed heroine is the good kid, because like my little niece um was apparently saying how she wanted to have yellow hair, because and to be pretty, and then
Hmm.
she watched Encanto and started loving her dark curly hair.
Oh, that's really sweet.
So
Great
yeah,
film.
yes, it is a
Um,
great film. And I think you know there are antecedents of the Wizard of Oz in all kids media, and I think
mm,
that's not a bad thing. But
uh,
this is the one, that something that is over 100 years old should have aged poorly,
mm.
at least some ways.
It is one of the things where, like, yeah, like if you look through a lot of this media has a lot of fucking problematic shit to it. And one example I always go to are Disney films like Dumbo, Fantasia, Song of the South. Like none of those have aged incredibly well on terms of their racial depictions. Like the crows they're bad, but like you compare them to say, the example I use a lot are the Warner Bros. Censored 11. If you don't know what they are, I, with my certain complexion, I'm not going to go into them in detail for you. You can look it up. The point is, comparing the racism of the Disney movies and the Warner Bros. Films, the censored 11 Warner Bros. Films, one goes up. The thing is, we don't show those movies to children. We show Dumbo to children. And that's kind of the issue with bringing these issues up is that, Wizard of Oz is still going to be seen by children and they're still going to get that message that beauty is connected to virtue. So it's a good thing to point this stuff out without saying that like the film needs to go away or some bullshit like that.
No, I think that there is my friend Lonnie Diane Rich talks about the raindrop versus rainstorm effect.
Yeah,
If one raindrop does not get you wet, it is not a big problem. But
yeah,
a rainstorm will wash your house away. Like if everything you see has the same negative messaging, then
yeah,
that's when it becomes disruptive. When it's a single solitary thing, when it's a moment in one film that
yeah,
can be addressed by having a discussion with kids, like
yeah,
that when Glinda said that only bad witches are ugly, that actually, there aren't people look lots of different ways, and there
mm,
doesn't need to be, the Wicked Witch, Margaret Hamilton isn't actually ugly. She just has a different kind of face.
mm.
To
And
have some kind of conversation like that, um, can easily address the thing without while still keeping the charms of the film.
no, and it's interesting because the Wicked Witch was actually meant to be played by a different actress before Hamilton took the role. Gail Sondergaard was really meant to play her. She's probably best known that she was the first woman to ever win an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress.
Huh.
So she was originally going to play the Wicked Witch of the West, and the thing is, she's a very glamorous, tall, very beautiful woman, and they were going to play up that the Wicked Witch was going to be more beautiful, and I think that's I think that was based more on the fact that the biggest influence for this coming onto this movie coming onto the screen was Snow White, so the evil queen, going to be like that. But once they changed directors, they were trying to, um, they basically decided to make her more close to the book, where she is ugly, and Sondergaard just walked off. She didn't want to play that part, so then Hamilton was brought on board. And again, as you said, it's good that they got someone who had a lot of empathy for the character, even though the character is obviously a one-note villain, which is fine for this film, like it works for it. But it's just an interesting thing that like they 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 cut out the whole. They obviously were going to cut out the whole only bad witches are ugly thing. If Sondergaard was going to play her, and
Mm-hmm.
then they just put it back in once they decided to make her character ugly again for whatever um reason. Not that, um, the implication that like getting someone more, you know, allegedly attractive was going to like change their whole perception of how the character was played. Um, it's bullshit politics from
It
that time,
might
and like,
have, but I think maybe Margaret Hamilton having the experience of being not the Hollywood beauty might have added to
mm,
the empathy with which she, you know, approached the role. And anything's better than Mila Kunis with the CGI green.
Jesus Christ, oh God, I was just thinking about that film because me and actually same day we went to see. Well, I showed Wizard of Oz. Me and my friend went to see Spider-Man 2. Still holds up, still kicks ass. But yeah, we brought up that whole thing of Sam Raimi making the prequel movie, which is so bad, and Mila Kunis is particularly awful in it. But yeah, like you said, I think it worked out for the better that Hamilton took the role because I like the kind of fiery venom she brings to that part. It's so good. And another famous little anecdote, I don't know, she nearly burnt to death because of this part. Um,
Yeah, see, there's nothing safe about this production.
nope, from what I've heard, now there's that phrase, every movie's a mini miracle because so much goes into film that it's fucking amazing that anything gets made. But from what I've heard from behind the scenes stuff, like again, I will link that video because it's a really good example of what happened behind the scenes. But so much shit went wrong during the production of it. Like famously, the original actor played the Tin Man had to be recast because the they used this aluminum dust to create the tin machine. They create the Tin Man look, and he inhaled it, and he nearly choked to death because it was lining his lungs. So he was hospitalized for 6 weeks.
Yeah, that reminds me, like, since this is usually a Farscape podcast, the actor Virginia Hay, who plays who has this character Zahn, who is this blue lady with this incredible
Yeah,
look, has to leave at the end of the second season because the the makeup was becoming was damaging her health, and
jeez,
also just like she also struggled from like just the sheer amount of time she had to spend in the makeup chair, and also like she shaved her head and her eyebrows for the role, and she's this incredible, like she was a Bond woman, and she found it really emotionally difficult to look at herself with, you know, bald and without eyebrows, sort of
Jesus.
unwomaned in her, sort of like, you know, it gave her gender dysphoria, and so she couldn't
No.
stay with the role, and they did a beautiful job of writing her out because they're a respectful production, unlike
Mm.
I mentioned Joss Whedon earlier, but unlike
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of Hollywood, this and you know, this filmed in Australia and everything.
Mm.
But unlike a lot of productions, it's interesting when you look at the history of film production and television production and the lessons that have been learned versus the lessons that have not been learned.
Yeah.
It tells you a lot, like how much was learned in terms of being more safety conscious with the makeup and with not putting gelatin on horses.
At
Learning.
least they learned that while shooting the movie. The SPCA were like, don't do that.
And now we have like people who monitor how animals are treated on sets, and
Yeah.
and Margaret Hamilton was lit on fire, and now we have like a whole industry around making sure that fire is safe
Yeah.
when used for effects, and not just on screen but also on stage. You have to be in, there's a whole like rigmarole you have to go through to use
Yeah.
fire safely. And we've learned with stunts, and we learned with it, sexual assault somehow
Mm.
somehow that is the thing at which all of the ones that have happened, and safety lessons have not been learned.
Of course.
And I laugh, but in a this is gallows humor,
Yeah.
because it
It's,
is just, yeah.
the Shakespeare quote I'm paraphrasing. Why do you laugh? Because I have no more tears to shed.
Yes. And like child stars, thankfully there are a lot more rules now to how they're treated
Yeah.
than in Judy Garland's day.
Thankfully.
It took a long time for a lot of them to come in, and still it is a, we just had the which the documentary about the Nickelodeon kids,
yes, I quite
all of
upset.
that. And who knows what is happening to this. Hopefully this generations of child stars are treated better. Hopefully we but on the other hand, they have social media to deal with, and you have things like
Yeah.
Kit Harington's treatment, or not. No, that's the wrong actor. The kid who played the
I think it's
kid,
Kid Connors or something from it.
yeah, the kid in Heartstopper who got bullied
It's coming out, yeah.
into coming out.
It's Connor, yeah.
Yeah, wrong kid. But yeah, like there's a different danger there, and yes, this is a different kind of danger that people weren't prepared for. But it is interesting when we look at the things that we learn from
Yeah.
and the things that we don't, because shit happens, and when you don't know that how to prevent a fire, Mark Hamilton gets burned.
Yeah.
But it's inexcusable. It would be inexcusable for an actor to be harmed by that now, because we know what to do to prevent it.
No,
Like
completely.
uh yeah, like The Crow should have been the last film wherever an actor died from a firearm, but it wasn't. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
sadly.
yeah, like the safety precautions are incredibly important. And this is a weird tangent we got on, but I think it's like the whole thing with the makeup connection having been
Yeah, yeah.
an issue in Farscape, as well as
Yeah.
in Wizard of Oz.
That show
And
was made like 60 years afterwards.
mhm,
These are, yeah, as you said, these issues still come up.
yeah,
There's a really famous anecdote about the Grinch where the prosthetics that Jim Carrey's put into were so painful, he had to learn like this way of like compartmentalizing his pain in order to actually get into it, which is like,
and
it
the
sounds,
film was not worth it.
no, I don't know. Yeah, that movie sucks.
we
But
had we had the Boris Karloff version. We don't need to.
yeah, but it's just incredible that, yeah, like you said, like, yeah, he went through that amount of physical pain just to go into a costume. That's
Mhm.
really messed up.
Yeah, and part of that is sometimes there is a thing in Hollywood of sort of fetishizing the suffering.
Mm,
That is generally about in art in general, that it is like the suffering that makes the art, and not it is resilience and survival. And sometimes you make art to survive.
yeah. And and again, this was, and I don't know if this was done a lot in the 2010s. I think it's kind of bubbled down, thankfully, but there was all those stories about like DiCaprio did that a lot, like suffer and going through incredibly dangerous shit just to, show his authenticity in his performance, or actors losing a ton of weight and stuff,
Yeah,
and it's like, and it's being glorified in the media, and like as fetishized as you say, and it's like somebody's going to get themselves killed just to get a trophy. Like, this is
yeah.
messed up.
A lot of the actors who starve themselves and dehydrate themselves have probably done a great deal of harm to themselves, to their
Yeah.
health. We'll find out eventually. And yeah, that was their choice.
Mm.
Um, but still, you know, yeah, we shouldn't be encouraging that, and
No,
especially
not at
when
all.
the more we know, the more we know about the dangers of these things, the more we should be.
And
Um,
again, this goes back to Garland, who, rather famously destroyed her life, and well, her life was destroyed. That I don't want to imply that she was at fault. She absolutely was not. Even if, honestly, even if she made a conscious choice to take the amphetamines herself, drug addiction is
she
not a
survived a
personal
lot of
failing.
shit.
Yeah,
I think I don't want to think of her life as being ruined, but
no,
she was
it's like, yeah,
she
that's hyperbole. But she went through a lot. Um, for the sake of this, for the sake of this, for the sake of this film. Um,
this film and
and it's
other films and
another, yeah.
yeah, the yeah, she was a lot of it was out, you know, she was an abused child.
Mm.
Um,
I was going to call myself out there for that framing, because I shouldn't have used the word destroyed, because I literally just made a video about how people say the same stuff about Robin Williams, and
it
I just
gets in your head, doesn't it? But you caught
yeah, and
yourself.
like,
That's the thing.
no, no, yeah,
Yeah,
I shouldn't be perpetuating that idea that, like, she had kids, she had a life, it didn't help the suffering she went through, but
yeah,
she had a full life outside of this. And
yeah,
it's not just me wanting to talk about one of my favorite movies, what somebody doing the whole Shelley Duvall from The Shining thing, of just like, this movie has a terrible thing behind it. It's like, as we said before, yeah, that's a lot of art, but it's not just that. She had a full career for this. She was beloved. She's still iconic to this day. Um, it'd be better if she wasn't suffering, but yeah,
yeah, yeah. I want to think of her as a person who endured. Um,
yeah,
I wish she
completely.
didn't. I just wish she didn't have to endure as much as she did.
No,
And
absolutely.
and that she could have had a longer life. I actually enjoyed the biopic. It's not exactly great, but I still enjoyed it. The Renee
Um,
Withers or the Renee Zellweger one.
yeah, her
Um,
performance was amazing in that.
but I think the difference between this and Shelley Duvall and The Shining, and I don't know how true all of that was about the Shining, because I've heard various accounts of whether it was or not. Um, the thing is that because of the auteur thing, people like hold that up as as good art. Like
Mm.
not I mean the film, whether you think it is good art or not, but the idea that it was okay that he did that to Shelley Duvall to get that performance, if indeed
No,
it's true that and
mm.
it's the narrative that that was okay, or that that was worth it, is the problem narrative.
No, I do agree, and I mean, it's not just this film. This film is probably one of the worst examples of it. But Kubrick has had a tendency to put his actors through a lot of shit. I've said before, the sign of a humane, well, okay, the sign of a caring director is if they have cast members who continue to work with them afterwards, and
Mhm.
not just for prestige because they like working with. Because you see sometimes some actors like like I think was it Jennifer Lawrence worked with David Russell a couple of times because she wanted to win an award, whereas usually if you see an actor who has consistently the same amount of actors director sorry who's consistently the same amount of actors who continue to work with them, usually a sign they're a director who treats their cast with some sense of humanity. Point is, I think the only person who ever worked Kubrick again, don't quote me on this, I don't know this for sure, was Peter Sellers. Um, because he put his actors through hell. Now, the problem is, people, as with Judy Garland, as with Robin Williams, people took this idea that The Shining completely destroyed her life and destroyed her mental health and destroyed everything. That's the thing that she herself has spoken out against. She has, again, you can feel whatever you want about Kubrick herself. She has spoken kindly about him. She said that she doesn't deny that he put her through a lot in that production, but and it could be her minimizing her own trauma with that. But the point is, it's over exaggerated, and it honestly is really condescending towards Duvall as an actress because she was an amazingly may she rest like rest in peace. She's an amazingly talented woman, and it made her entire life out to be like she was some victim, which isn't true. Like she went through her own stuff, like a lot of people in the industry has, but it's not just because of this film, and it doesn't diminish the fact that she acted years afterwards, and she was but yeah, that just giving the context of that.
I choose to remember her for fairy tale theater because
Hmm.
I adored that growing up. Um, and that was made without torturing any actors.
Yeah, so you don't have to yeah, like I said, you don't have to like Kubrick. There's a lot of reasons to dislike him as a filmmaker, well, as a person and the way he treated his actors. But the whole thing with Duvall is the way people have framed it. Also, people bring it up like the whole John Lennon beat, the whole John Lennon beat up his wife meme. People do it just to shit on others for liking certain things
Yeah,
sometimes.
the,
So
the the useful thing is that all of these people are dead. So as long as you don't
yeah.
fetishize, as long as you don't hero worship them, you can still enjoy their art. Like
Hmm.
I think it's okay to all artists are flawed, all humans are
Yeah.
flawed. Sometimes very very flawed. And when their actions are no longer hurting people, I think it's okay to enjoy the art while critically being like, yeah, I'm aware. Not that I'm not gonna show the Wizard of Oz to my nibblings as children and be like, so you know what went on behind the scenes of this. But
Again,
there's a point when we're adults where we appreciate where we can appreciate the art and understand the wrongs that happened while making it. Um,
yeah, completely.
yeah,
Uh,
and the thing to move away from is I think the especially with directors the sort of cult of auteur that acts as if and whatever they do is okay.
yeah,
And I would push back even on the necessarily worker the cast members returning necessarily being the rubric because Jimmy Stewart was happy to work with Hitchcock multiple times,
no, yeah,
but the
yeah.
actresses
But,
weren't.
but yeah, he treated Jimmy well. He didn't treat the actresses. Yeah,
Yeah, he
that's a fair example.
he didn't treat the
Um,
women well.
no,
And he even like Edith had worked with him multiple times, but it was specifically the women actors that he
yeah,
and yeah
no, that's
and
a fair
like
point to make.
yeah this it all it, like we're talking a lot about powerful men abusing their power and I know that isn't maybe that does connect with the Wizard of Oz because the wizard is kind of except the wizard actually isn't a threat.
No,
He just appears to be, and I think perhaps there is something in that sometimes if you unmask the man behind the curtain, he loses his power.
yeah, a lot of power that certain men have. It's about perception and the prestige rather than the actual weight they hold. Because once you strip that away, they lose a lot of their power.
Mhm.
And that's the same with the wizard because again, he's a con artist who basically just found a decent gig for him to live on. Um,
Yeah. And in Judy Garland's case, a lot of the abuse was done by her mother. So it's not only men.
yeah.
But yeah, this is kind of I suppose it's not surprising that we ended up talking about this stuff, given that I call this show usually call this show Muppet Sex and Trauma. So so we're talking about there's no trauma on screen.
I mean, I'm more than happy to talk about the lighter stuff in it that we've kind of stuck over.
I think it's good to talk about the dark side and the light side as well. And and we began with the light side a lot, and the hope and the joy that we find, and so in a weird way, I kind of want to bring weird kind of fun way. I want to bring it back to a fun thing before we conclude, which is when a song from this was once again in the charts many years after.
I think me and my
because it was the go-to song when Thatcher died.
Me and my friend brought that up when we were watching this. Oh man, the fucking sheer utter delight when she passed away and the song came back. That was fucking magical. Jesus Christ. Like, obviously I'm Irish. I have a lot of not nice opinions of that woman, but I will absolutely give the one thing I will give to my my neighbors over the sea, which we have a very historically complicated relationship with. No matter how much we hate her, you will never hate her as much as the north of fucking England hates that woman. Or the Scottish or the Welsh.
Yeah, and I think for my Scottish side of my family, I just had to bring in the opportunity to enjoy that once again. The witch is dead.
Have you ever you? I'm assuming you've heard about the Chumbawamba, tom tomping guys.
Yeah, I remember the song, and I know they're like major socialists.
Yeah, they're major anarchist band, but they made an album when Thatcher was dying, basically celebrating her death. You could pre-order it on their website, and when she died, they released the album and never sold it again. I live for that level of spite.
Well, the wonderful Scottish woman, her name I don't remember, who was interviewed during at her death and said that I'd drive a stake through her heart. She has passed on, and I hope she is looking. I hope she is maybe gone on a Thatcher hunt in the afterlife for all of us.
It's like that. It's like that. It's like that doom meme of your man holding up. Where is Margaret Thatcher? Yeah, and again, I think that really speaks because we've delved into so many topics about again, queer readings, but also the abuse behind the scenes and Hollywood in general. And I think that just shows how ephemeral the movie is. It reflects everything in this culture. It taps onto so many elements that, again, we could make a 9-hour podcast just talking about how much this movie has influenced the culture. And I think the best way of example of that is that a woman died and this ditty from 1939 got back in the charts to celebrate that the witch has died.
And now forever when we watch this movie, we will have a smile and a chuckle at the reminder that Margaret Thatcher died and Trump will too someday.
Oh man. I guess you can make the Witch is Dead gender neutral and re-release get that back in the chart when he goes.
They'll find someone, some genius will find the right thing when that happens when he goes.
Yeah, no, completely.
But that was just a perfect pop culture moment with Margaret Thatcher. So yeah, we could talk forever about this film. But we have talked for 2 hours.
There is no natural conclusion when talking about the Wizard of Oz and trying to talk about the broader cultural impact because it's impacting like fucking everything for the past 85 years.
Including Farscape, because yeah, this is a big part of the DNA of Farscape.
I really again, obviously I don't have any context for the Farscape stuff, so I'm hoping your regular audience is like okay with me being on board talking about David Lynch and Shelley Duvall on this random tangents we went on.
Yeah, no, I think it's been fun, and we should bring you in for an episode, maybe one that doesn't require a lot of context. Although,
No,
if you want to watch the show, there's a podcast that you can watch it along with.
I'll keep that in mind. I'm always watching something.
The way that we end our podcast here is we talk about our favorite part. So, Dani, I ask you, what is your favorite part of this film?
Oh man, that's actually difficult. Honestly, I'm just going to be cliche, especially after doing this rewatch. It has to be the Over the Rainbow song for me. And like even with the majesty and the wonders of the world, that longing is so pungent in it. Also, one more thing, because we were talking about animal welfare, all I'm thinking about when I was seeing it was the dog being perched on that thing, and I was like, that is a really well trained dog, and I hope he doesn't fall. I'm really worried for this 85-year-old dog, long dead now. But no, no, I think it really sums up what people really adore about this movie and the escapism it provides and the longing it kind of speaks towards. That's a very universal thing, and it's really summed up in beautiful performance. It's so well shot, and like I said, Judy Garland, just what a talent! Just an
Mhm.
amazing force of personality and influence that I don't think we've ever really and encapsulated. So again, boring answer, but honest one, I hope.
Yeah, that's also mine. Yeah, I was thinking, it's particularly, I think the line, "If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't I?" I'm sorry for singing. I'm not good at it. But I think that that just, there's something about that little, the way that the little happy little bluebirds image just,
Mm,
yeah. My number two favorite, since Somewhere with the Rainbow is rather basic, is the door opening and that, move into color.
oh god, that transition is fucking it's so smooth. I thought it's so good.
Yeah.
Um if I again if I were to pick another one, probably when probably when the wizard is unmasked, so to speak, and the way he kind of flummoxes his way into giving everyone their gifts. Because I love that whole team of like I said, we've already talked about the characters in this, but the whole team of what they needed was within them all along. And you see that when they rescue Dorothy, especially, that they all had what they wanted. They just weren't aware of it. And I love that's such a great universal theme that's kind of really distinguished this. It really stands out in this film, especially because it's not really something that you see explored a lot, but it's really potent here, and he gives him the gift. And like Frank Morgan, as we said, he's really good at playing the flummoxing. He's kind of got this kind of flummoxing everyman quality to him, but he's also clearly someone who's thinking on his feet and trying to get out of things, which makes him such a different. He's not the slimy snake oil salesman. He's a very different kind of con artist where he becomes your
Not
best friend.
James Franco.
No, not James Franco. Way different energy. Well, that's my second favorite.
Yeah, yeah. No, yes. And I think the idea that it is what you need to survive is within you all along, but
Mm,
also you need the community to help you find it, to show it to
yeah,
you.
no, completely.
Um,
Because
yeah,
they all get together to save Dorothy, and yeah,
yeah. And yeah, it does that thing about recognizing, seeing yourself in other people, shows you who you are, and it's just all great story stuff. So,
yeah.
talking about seeing people, where can people see you?
Right. My channel name is You Call Yourself a Film Critic. as I mentioned, like literally a couple of hours ago, I released a video about Robin Williams on the anniversary of his death, and it's speaking about the movie World's Greatest Dad and how much I like the ending and a particular line in it. I've also did a much longer video that came out a week ago. I'm not usually this prolific in my uploads. It was just the timing of it. Um, or I think about Lola Bunny and how she reflects on how women were written and depicted, and it goes into deeper topics and it gets more serious as it goes along. That's kind of my two latest things. So yeah, we talked about the film critic. I talk about movies and I analyze stuff in that kind, in this kind of uh, more internalized fashion, because you could say, like, I don't know how to I don't know how to sell myself as a unique in this kind of blush, but yeah, just check me out. That's hopefully you find something. My friend once told me that after I showed him, I did a video about last year about the apocalypse movies that I know were being released around Christmas time, and just kind of made a whole film about that. And my friend was like, I never would have thought of that. You think of great things the way to do it. And I was like, I guess that's one way of selling me.
Yes. Yeah. And also you are great fun to follow on Twitter.
Yes, my account is Film Critic. Maybe that's kind of my biggest platform, really. So uh, yeah, again, stream of consciousness rants and getting either making either stuff that just comes on top of my head or me ranting about whatever current issue is pissing me off, either in real life or in movies and comic books.
Yeah. And I am, of course, Sara Ezzat. I make videos as the Fat Culture Critic, and I finished my latest one about Bridgerton, and how it's not good and we need better. It's not just me complaining about something the whole time. I don't like to do that. I tried to find a way of like looking at what makes love stories work to talk about why this one didn't. So I really enjoyed doing the whole sort of what makes love stories work, which leads into the next videos that I'm making. I'm making one sort of following on from that is me talking about some of my favorite love stories, just kind of a quickie.
Cool.
Thank you very much for joining me today. And I hope that you enjoyed talking about The Wizard of Oz, and I hope that our audience will have enjoyed listening to us talk about this
Absolutely.
iconic
Like I said,
film.
if you ever want me to talk about a classic movie, I'm more than happy to come on board and to chat away.
All right. So we will leave it there. Join me in 2 weeks. I'll be releasing an episode from the main one of the main episodes talking about Farscape, talking about Muppets, Sex and Trauma, and then after that there'll be another one of these, something vaguely connected with someone I can convince to talk to me about a film. So okay, that is gonna be us, and I'm gonna stop talking now. Bye.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby.